So we're here in, well, we're in Loudonville, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Loudonville, New York. And today we're speaking with James Owens, and we're going to be talking about his experiences as a civil rights pioneer back in the early days of the movement. Jim, I'm going to begin by asking you about your family. I know you come from a large family. Tell me a little bit about the family.
Well, large family, yes. I'm the oldest of 11. 5 boys and 5 girls are behind me. Mom and Dad met when they were in high school and married and developed a family rather quickly. Dad was a sheet metal worker in Chester, Pennsylvania, working for the Sunship Dry Docking Company. And he was one of a few black craftsmen at that time. Mom was a housewife. She took care of us, taught us, nurtured us, and rather disciplined us. But it had to be because the 5, behind me real quickly, and there was 5 behind them real quickly. There had to be some discipline in the house. But my sister Monica, my sister Myrtle, and Brenda, they're all in the great beyond now. They had their reward. My brother Billy and my brother Charlie Chester, they were in the service. We all were served we all wore uniform. Billy passed, Chester passed, Charles, this past year.
And you were born when?
I was born July 21, 1935.
1935.
Yes, and I got baptized at St. Joseph's Church.
Mm-hmm.
And subsequently, as we progressed, I became a super altar boy. Instead of wearing the black and white, I wore the red and gold,
Uh-huh.
And I was designed to be a holy guy, and Mom set her designs on me to become a priest. Well, firstborn back in the day.
Yeah.
Firstborn son,
Yeah.
priest. Firstborn daughter, a nun. Well,
Didn't
didn't
exactly
quite
work out that way. No,
But the family was large, the family was happy,
yeah.
and we all went to school.
In the course of the research that I've done over the last 20 years,
Mhm.
I've met a lot of very interesting people who've shared their stories with me. But one person I will always remember is your mother, Clementina Owens. And talking now, at the time
Yep.
we met, she was in the retirement home, and she was well into her 90s.
90s, yeah.
Yeah. And she started talking about when she was a young woman and talked about her mother, or was it her grandmother, who had been enslaved?
Grandmother.
Her grandmother. That would have been your
Great-grandmother.
great-grandmother. And I said, I've got this connection
Yeah, wow.
with history that's going way back. And
Yeah,
she was a lovely lady. I
Indeed so.
enjoyed meeting her.
indeed so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Earl, my son Earl, is now the historian. He's looking
Of
up
the
people.
family.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And he's found traces of relatives who on the eastern shore of Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And like back in the day when my mother and grandmother and grandfather moved up to Wilmington, they were associated with the oyster beds
Mm-hmm.
and got moved out by corporate,
Mm.
things like that. And then that's how they ended up in Delaware. But I still have family ties in Cheswold, Smyrna, Clayton, Delaware.
Uh-huh.
One of the, I don't know whether you want to record this or not, but one of the things I learned was, being the oldest, I got shipped out of Wilmington to the country every summer.
Mm.
One time it was
Uh-huh.
Clayton, Delaware, next time it was Smyrna,
Uh-huh.
or Cheswold. In Cheswold, I learned from my uncle Alfred, who was a farmer, and he had 3 or 4 boys, and they showed me cucumbers, tomatoes, and all that
Yeah.
Matter of fact, how to steal a watermelon while his father was sitting on the porch. We'd kick it. We'd kick it over to an area where he couldn't see us. Anyway, the biggest thing about them for me was, what happened to your hair? You know? I said, this is what God gave me. They had slick black hair, Indian background, you know, Indian
I see.
heritage. So that was all fun and games. But during the polio epidemic, I had to spend extended time in the lower part of Delaware. And I learned a lot from that side of the family. But Mom and her mother and sisters, we never got to interview them like Earl is interviewing some of their relatives now in the lower part of Delaware, of Maryland. So he's gaining a whole bunch of information.
But that's where the Catholicism came in, because that was a very Catholic.
Yes. And Grandpa Crawford, Mr. Hill, and the guys who used to laugh at me, my hair used to be red. They called me Carrot Top.
And my hair used to be curly.
Anyway, I learned all these things as we went along, you know, and it's all good stuff.
So tell me about being a black Catholic. You know,
It's interesting, looking back on it, at the time I never thought about it. At the time when we had St. Joseph Church run by the Josephite fathers. And we were taught by the nuns from Pennsylvania, who thought they were being punished by having been sent to a black school in Wilmington, Delaware. Well, their motive was, we're going to make you the best students in the diocese. So we were taught well. And looking back on it, as I said, I never thought about it. The church was segregated as well. The diocese couldn't integrate the school because they had to abide by the law of the state. So the Josephites in the Mill Hill, they catered to the Negro population. And sorry, but that's Negro is a strong word, still is. And the Josephite had parishes from one in Boston, I found out later, Wilmington, Delaware, Baltimore, all the way down to the tip of the South.
okay.
And we were a typical Catholic community. You know, we had rules and regulations, just like the other parishes had rules and regulations. We could go to their churches, we couldn't go to their schools. So we thought that was kind of strange.
You said the church was segregated, but yet you had white priests and you had white sisters teaching you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And their dedication to us was outstanding. But the white we had black priests couldn't go into the diocesan seminary. There was only two places a black candidate could go: the Josephites or the Society of the Divine Word in Missouri. So we rarely saw black priests. The black priests at the Society of the SVDs, they became missionaries. But the priests who came out of the Josephites were mostly white. And later on, there were a few black ones, but that's the way it was.
You mentioned to me one of the Josephite priests who was of African American heritage, but he hid that heritage. He was passing.
Yes, he was passing. And my brother was named after him. His name was Father Chester C. Ball. And he had a parish in Georgetown. And he was passing. And we never let our brother live it down. Come on, Charles Chester C. You know, my mom named him after the priest because he would visit, but you know, he couldn't. And, you know, we knew who he was,
but it was not generally known in the community.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, you went to the St. Joseph's School through 8th grade.
Through 8th grade,
right?
Yeah.
And your experiences there in St. Joseph's School, I imagine it was a rather rigorous kind of education.
It was. The nuns, you know, and Mom wanted me to play the piano, and I wanted to play ball, you know. And, you know, we were altar boys, and we were excellent altar boys. And
I remember learning the Latin.
Absolutely. And to
You
this
probably
day,
can still
we
say
it.
those responses.
Not
can't
only
you?
Patris and Philia Spiritus Sanctus. We still say part of it. But my mom made me take piano lessons in the side of the schoolyard. And in the schoolyard, they were playing baseball. And I would go, dun, 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 plunk, and somebody would hit the ball. I lose concentration. So the nun says, Mrs. Owens, he is not a good candidate. He wants to be out in the ballpark. So I got out of learning how to play piano.
Now, one of the things I learned from talking with you was about the state of Delaware. I never thought of Delaware as being a southern state, but it was a segregated state, the northernmost state
That was segregated.
that had state-regulated segregation
True.
in schools and many other.
As a matter of fact, Mom and Dad went to Howard High. Howard High was the only high school in the state that would accept Negro students in the state.
So if you lived elsewhere
You
in
commuted up.
Wilmington and you wanted to go to high school, you had to
Commute up.
work out some arrangement to go to
Mhm.
Wilmington.
So very few people from Dover, Clayton, and the southern tip of the state got a high school education. They went into farming where their parents were doing that and so
Mhm.
forth. Howard High School was also an excellent high school.
Uh-huh.
And several, well, one renowned musician came out of there, and that was Clifford Brown,
Okay.
the trumpet player.
So tell me how the segregation existed in Wilmington. What aspects of the community were segregated, which were not segregated?
Well, the east side was mostly black, but whites could live wherever they wanted. So St. Patrick's people lived behind me. I lived at Poplar Street. Now the southern part of the city was all black, and it was near the high school, so that the population kept to itself. In the middle was mixed. In the south end, down by the train station, was mostly black. Across Market Street was called the West Side. And the West Side was mostly white. On one section over there, like DuPont Street or Claymont Street, I think it was Clayton Street, blacks had a row of houses that they maintained. But
Okay.
it was difficult in that you were always suspect if you were in a white neighborhood. And as a matter of fact, I tell the story all the time. I got a job to cut grass, and I was cutting Mrs. Walsh, shall we say, her name was, and she said, "Jimmy, you're doing a fine job. I'm going to recommend you to my neighbor." Well, she recommended me to her neighbor, and I gave her a sample of my grass cutting ability, and she says, "Very good, but the trash man is coming today or tomorrow. Would you bring up the ashes from the basement?" I brought up the ashes from the basement, put them out in the back porch, the backyard, and went back down and swept up, and I found a silver dollar. And
A silver dollar.
yeah, so I came up and I said, "Mrs., I saw this down in the basement. Did you lose it?" "I've been looking all over for that." After I turned that dollar in, I got hired to do the job. So we're always testing.
It was a test.
It was a test.
It was a test of your honesty.
Yes, indeed.
And had you been prepared for something like that? Did you expect that you would be tested?
Dad told me to.
Ah.
Be ready.
Uh-huh.
They're going to check you out. So yeah, we were ready for that.
You were ready.
Yeah. He told a story a long time ago, and we never forgot it. You're going to be tempted all the time. But he said, "I don't want you coming home telling me the cops are after you because you robbed a 7-Eleven store. I'll tell the cops my son is not that dumb. But if you come home and tell me you were hooked up in a Brinks robbery, I'll get you the best lawyer in the country." In Delaware, they still had the rope, the cat o' nine tails. If you looked at a white woman, you could get whipped.
Really?
Oh, yes. And not until maybe 10 years ago, they eliminated it down in Dover. And so, you'd never whistle or looked at a white woman because you knew what the consequences could be.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, you got to think about it. You can go to jail in 3 to 5 years for looking or getting caught looking. You can go to jail for 5 to 10 years for robbing a store. If you have a job and you're making $5,000 a year, you got to think about the consequences if you get caught doing something dumb. They multiply that by, that's where you start.
Right.
So he says, that's what you start thinking about, stealing. So we had little applications, little illustrations.
So even though Wilmington was segregated in many respects, you still had opportunities to interact with white kids your age.
Oh, absolutely. We had the CYO.
Uh-huh.
In the Catholic diocese, we had the CYO.
Yeah.
And we had basketball and track, and two of the main sports then. And we could play each other. And we did play each other back and forth. They would come to our gym, we would go to theirs. And our gym was built by the men in the parish.
Mm-hmm.
So they built that. But other gyms we went to, they were like built by construction companies. They're outstanding. So we would go and give them a good game and have to walk back home. But the word was, and we found out to be true, in St. Hedwig's parish, we found out that they hated black people. And if you went out to St. Hedwig's, you better lose. or you're going to get chased home. So, that was a challenge. And it happened. We got chased. But
You were on the basketball team?
no, I was too small for a basketball team. I was a fan.
I see.
We'd all show up and cheer the guys.
Okay. But I believe you ran track.
I ran track.
Yeah.
In parochial school and in high school.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about this then. You finished 8th grade at St. Joseph's, and your mom and dad had gone to Howard High School.
Yes.
And I'm sure most of your classmates had gone
Oh,
to
absolutely.
Howard High School,
Yeah.
but you did not.
I went to Howard High
Oh, okay.
for the intro.
Uh-huh.
You know how you get orientation.
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 Okay, I get it, yeah.
And I said, Mom, this is not for me. She said, what's the problem? I said, they're not Christian, number one. Don't act like it. And I said, I'd like to apply to Salesianum, Archmere Academy. And she said, well, try your luck.
Tell me, what was Salesianum, what was Archmere?
Archmere was a private Catholic boys' school in the outside of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Salesianum was a inner city Catholic boys' school at 8th and West.
Okay.
And that was mid city, right down the street from the DuPont Company headquarters.
And you wanted to continue your Catholic education.
Because, I was still contemplating priesthood then, And so a fellow ahead of me named Joe Brown had tried it. And Father Lawless was told by his superior that wasn't going to happen.
Who is Father Lawless?
Father Tom Lawless, he was the principal of Salesianum.
Okay.
So that was maybe 3 years ahead of me. So this is Mrs. Lawson, Irma Lawson, she was a member of the council of the city. And she sponsored him to go to Southeast Catholic High. Because he couldn't get into a Catholic
Southeast Catholic High where?
in Philadelphia.
How would he get to Philadelphia?
He took a train every day.
Every day, back and forth on the
forth.
train.
So he got, I think, into an accident and was no longer able to continue his high school education. Well, Father Lawless had to back off, and in the meantime, Mom and Dad were in the Catholic Interracial Council
Mm-hmm.
with a couple of lawyers and a couple of judges, and they were getting things done behind the backs of a lot of people.
You were going to Southeast Catholic
Only
at that time.
At that time, yes, because
Okay.
she heard about me not wanting to go to Howard and wanting to continue my education. So she sponsored my train ride and my tuition to Southeast Catholic. I went over to Southeast Catholic, made my application, got accepted. I transferred back
Tell
and
me
forth.
about your experience at Southeast Catholic.
Southeast Catholic was in South Philadelphia.
Right.
And everybody in South Philadelphia, we used to say that the last names ended in a vowel.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little,
Heavily Italian?
yes indeed.
Uh-huh.
So Italians are great because there weren't many of us around. And we were a novelty, you go by and say, "Hi, Mr. Bastianelli, how are you?" He said, "Owens," and throw apple at me, They were great. So there's no tension in my freshman year.
Uh-huh.
And there was strictness, the boys were disciplined, so we kept on our P's and Q's. But it was good. I didn't excel. I did my homework on the train, I had a paper route when I got home, but I was passing.
Mm-hmm.
So everything was fine.
Okay.
And I was loving it. The second year, my sophomore, I planned to go out for track.
Mm-hmm.
That's when Dad and Mom went to this meeting and got the good news.
Got the good news. What good news is that? Now tell us how this
Mom and
this
Dad
happened.
were quiet activists.
Uh-huh.
And Dad more so than Mom. But they were part of the Catholic Interracial Council. They weren't widely well known either. So they'd meet once a month over to the sporting goods store on 9th Street in the spare room upstairs. And Mom and Dad were at this meeting one night when the guest speaker was Father Tom Wallace, the principal of Salesianum. And one of the principals of officer of the Catholic Interracial Council told Father Lawless about, there's a young man here who's going to Philadelphia every morning so he can get a Catholic education. And Father Lawless says, that shouldn't be. And he said, well, by the way, his parents are here. So I was told his parents, he came over to talk to my parents and told my parents, I want that boy in my office tomorrow morning. And Dad came home and told me.
This was a Sunday evening,
Sunday
right?
evening meeting, yeah. So that next Monday morning, I had to be at Father Thomas Lawless' office.
Uh-huh.
And so I went in and I knocked on the door, and the secretary, Miss Stahl, she never married, said, what can I do for you? I said, I'm here to see Father Lawless. Oh, let me see. So she opened the door to Father Lawless and said, Jimmy, boy, come on in. She had no idea that this was happening. So he told me how it was going to be, how I had to act, how I had to work through. And he said, if there's any problem, you come to me. You don't solve them yourself. And he said, tomorrow morning, 4 other young Catholic men are going to join you. Tuesday, all 5 of us went to separate classes, integrated school. No fanfare, no problems. We knew everybody in the school because we were playing against them in the CYO.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about the specific instructions on how you were to act as a Salesianum scholar.
The premise was in Salesianum, you're a Salesian gentleman. And one of the St. Francis de Sales is to be a gentleman and be all you can be. Mm-hmm. So the parameters were there. You had to follow through with the rules and regs. And everybody wore a necktie. Everybody wore a jacket.
And you're still doing it.
And there were no exceptions.
Uh-huh.
You couldn't wear peg pants. You couldn't wear
blue jeans. Blue jeans would be out.
So we got along. I was in one class. Tom and Alfred were in the same class. Bill Jones was behind me, and Fred was behind me.
Uh-huh.
And we were all in different levels. And I was a track guy. Tom and Alfred were musicians. They could play in the band. Bill was a football, basketball player.
He was a star.
He was a star. Yeah, he was a star. And we all took our separate spots in the school. Mm-hmm. And very little aggression was shown by some of the students. In my case, I was on the track team, and Father O'Neill gave me the same thing that Father Lawless says, Owens, if there's any problems. By that time, I had been nicknamed Jess.
Jesse,
Jesse.
as of the great Olympian.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Jesse, if there's any problem, you let me know. So I was in the room and this guy was singing, I hear the gentle voices calling, old black Joe. So I said to Father Neil, I said, got a little problem here. This guy keeps singing Old Black Joe. I said, who? He said, I'll take care of that tomorrow. So the next day, we had our track practice, and he called, Richard. Yes, Father. Starting line. Owens. Yes, Father. Starting line. I came up to the starting line, Father O'Neill says, dust them.
What was the distance? What did you?
100-yard dash.
100-yard dash. And you dusted him.
Dust them. And never heard another song. So those are applications, you know. And Tom Landgraf was the manager of the athletic teams, and he became my best friend. And he said he was going to go into the order of St. Francis de Sales. I said, Jesse, why don't you come along with me? I said, Tom, I'm not ready for this yet. He said, give it a shot. So we both put our applications in to our place at St. Francis de Sales. He was selected. I was not.
Oh.
So I went about my business and
Yeah.
looked for a job.
This is after you graduated?
Senior year.
Senior year,
Senior
okay.
year. I was working supermarket at that time,
Uh-huh.
part-time, after school. But after that, we all went to graduation. I said, what are you guys doing? He said, "But they're going to all different colleges and all that.
Mhm.
I didn't get a scholarship. I wasn't a good candidate for a scholarship. I was a good student.
Yeah.
So I had to look for a job. The guy said, come on, we're all going to work for DuPont Company. So we all went over and put our applications in for DuPont Company in the field of trainees, that sort of thing. And all my buddies got selected, I didn't. So I had to look for another job. And I went to work for the 7-Up company, 7-Up bottling company. And it was manual labor and, sifting bottles and stacking bottles and loading trucks, and I was making pretty good money between the two jobs, pretty good money. And I was putting it in the bank like my mother advised me. If you want to go to school, you got to pay for it. So that's how it got.
Let's go back to your high school experience for a little longer there. Did you ever run into any prejudice or discrimination from your teachers?
We never perceived it. I never did, except maybe one brother in the Oblates who said, Owens, you'll never learn anything here. And he was a French teacher. And we had to take 2 languages. We had to take two foreign languages. And I took French and German. And my mother was fluent in French, and she and back and forth. I don't know where she got it, but she would talk to Dad in terms that she didn't want us to understand what they were talking about. So, they were sharp. And so one of the things that, we would say, s'il vous plaît, we all that basic stuff. And then my mother one time said, il n'est pas de quoi. I said, Mom, I never heard that before. She said, think nothing of it. So when this brother told me, Owens, you'll never learn this French language. I said, il n'est pas de quoi. What? You get a different perception when you can answer and it's something that they think you don't have. So, I got through the course. But that was the only encounter. Most of them were open, One of the brothers gave me the name Jesse.
Yeah.
So no, they were true to their order. Sometimes, the human element would come to the fore, but no, I never experienced any prejudice or animosity from the students.
About associating with your fellow students after school?
As a no-no. We had no place to go. You know,
Certainly there were places to go.
there was an ice cream parlor down the corner.
Yeah.
I couldn't get served there. You know, there's a frat shop down the street. I couldn't get served there. So where they met after practice and where they went, I went home.
You went in your separate directions.
Sure, yeah. But we knew that.
Yeah. You knew that
We
going in.
grew up with it. We
Uh-huh.
had our own theater, you know, the Hopkins Theater on French Street. And there was a Warner Brothers Theater on Market, the Rialto Theater on Lower Market, and two other movie theaters. We couldn't go.
Mhm.
So we went to the Hopkins, you know?
So when you had your high school graduation, when you had important events at the school, were they ever held in the community outside of
Oh, yeah, the
campus?
school at that time was like a brick, 8th and West, it was known
Yeah.
as 8th and West. It was just a big building with small classrooms and narrow corridors and creaky floors. So when the teams played big games of basketball, we didn't have a gym, we had a cafeteria combination gymnasium. It would always be played at Fournier Hall, a diocesan facility with great basketball, great facilities for other sports as well. And that's where we played our games. But when graduation came, everybody went to the Hotel DuPont and used that facility
Uh-huh.
for graduation.
Wasn't the Hotel DuPont segregated?
Oh, absolutely.
So
Oh, yeah.
what happened?
Oh, I got in undetected.
I see.
Undetected, you know. Nobody knew, nobody talked about it.
Uh-huh.
I'm the only one in the class, and I had light skin,
Yeah.
and
Bill Jones didn't.
but he wasn't in my graduating
No,
class.
he was the next year.
Yeah. And so by that time, things were, you know, all over. I mean, then they built a new school. When they built a new school, they had the graduation on
Oh.
the facilities at the school.
Right.
So
right.
that's the problem.
Okay. Okay. Now you said that the five of you went in separate directions. You were not all put in the same homeroom or the same class.
Right. We were all different levels.
Pardon?
We were all at different grade levels.
That's true. Okay. So I saw the clipping from the Wilmington newspaper that showed the first black students at the school, but there were five of you sitting in the same classroom.
That was for the Times Union, the local newspaper.
That was just a
Yes,
stage,
yeah, that was
stage
staged.
photo.
Yes,
That
indeed.
never existed.
Never existed.
Yeah,
And even Tom and Alfred in the same grade level
yeah,
didn't have the same classes.
sure.
And Father Lovis says, this is my school, I'll do what I want with it. And then people threatened him. But we found out one of the objections was the parents of the boys didn't want any black students to be associated with their daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the beauty of going to Salesiana, it was all boys.
Yeah.
And we were all young men who,
Mhm.
you know, competed against each other.
So, while some parents might not have liked it, if it had been a co-ed school, you believe there would have been greater resistance to
If it had been co-ed school,
integration.
would never have happened.
Uh-huh.
Never happened. My
Would
sister,
not.
the following year after I did Salesianum, my dad, still robust in the Catholic Interracial Council, she was living in Boston, going to Holy Cross High School. He brought her home the following year so she could integrate St. Elizabeth's Girls' School.
I see.
You know, she didn't want to do it, but it had to be done because Salesianum had started it. St. Elizabeth was still all white. So Monica came home and she integrated the following year the girls' school. Now, after that, the city of Wilmington and other happenings were going on, desegregating such and such, was a little embarrassed. So Wilmington High opened up to all students. My other siblings went to Wilmington High,
Mm.
and they were the first to go there.
Mm.
But
Okay.
so that was public school system.
One thing we should establish was the date. What year was this that you and your 4 fellow students
I believe it
integrated
was
so easy.
1950.
And
I graduated at St. Joseph in 48, Southeast Catholic 49, 1950.
every time you tell that story, every time I heard you tell that story, you always emphasize 4 years before Brown versus Board of Education, right?
Right, right, and you did too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we never, at the time, paid attention to Brown versus Kennedy.
You weren't aware of that.
Because University of Delaware was segregated.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Delaware State,
Mm-hmm.
and we, meaning all black students,
Yeah.
went to Delaware State. My brother-in-law is a graduate of Maryland State, and he says, when you get out of Salesianum, you go to do 2 years in a black college, just for the experience. Then transfer to a white
Right.
college. But I didn't do that. But matter of fact, when I got out of college, when I got out of high school, I couldn't get into college because I didn't have the money. I got a scholarship to Elizabeth City, South Carolina for track, but I had to pay everything. It was just an invite, you know. My mom and dad couldn't afford it, nor could I, so I went to work.
Okay. Now, I remember when we talked with Bill Jones, and he talked about his experiences on his first day meeting a fellow student by the name of Felix Rapicella.
Rapicella.
Tell us
Felix is a great guy.
what happened here.
Bill was experiencing more static than I.
Why was that?
Well, he was darker skinned.
Uh-huh.
He was obviously out of place in many places. So he would catch a little hell. Felix came up behind him and says, Bill. He said, yeah. He said, let me, he said, I got your back. And when the fellows, friends of Felix, realized that he and Bill were friendly, they backed off. They backed off. He didn't have any problems after that.
And we should add that Felix was a tackle on the football team.
Yes.
And he's a pretty rough and tumble character,
Yes,
as I
yes,
understand
yes,
it.
he was. And you know, Bill was a good football player, so they had a rapport that couldn't be broken. And to this day, Rapicella, the name of Rapicella, is still prominent because his son is now the director of operations at Salesiana. It's amazing, amazing.
All right. So you graduated in 54.
53.
Yeah,
53.
53. We should
The
subtract
100th anniversary of the school.
1 year in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Okay, you graduated in 1953. And describe, your options where you went. You told us that you couldn't afford to go to college, you were working. But
I ran into static with my dad. My dad said, I got a job for you. You follow my footsteps, you'd be all right, because he's making good money. So I said, what is it? He says, become an apprentice in my field. He was a sun shipbuilder. He was a steel worker. He
sheet metal?
sheet metal. So I said, okay. I went up with him on a train, and he gave me my bucket, and I went around picking up the stuff that was left over by the craftsmen there. But I was called not an apprentice, but a devil.
Ah,
That didn't stick with me at all. I was called a devil.
I've heard the term printer's devil.
Yes.
Or an
I didn't know-
apprentice, right?
Yeah, that was that too. In later years, I became a printer's devil, but they had disbanded the term then.
Yeah.
But I said, Dad, I can't do this. He said, what's wrong with you, boy? This is how you get started. I said, I can't do this now. So I don't want to look for another job. That's when I started separating bottles of 7-Up and loading trucks in the evening. And then the Buick, General Motors, Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac set up an assembly plant just outside the city. It was BOP, Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac. We call it the BOP plant. I went out to get a a job. I went out with a job application, got hired,
Uh-huh.
my first union experience, and I was free to, all my assignments came over to ticker tape, and I was putting in this, that, and the other on the cars coming along the assembly line, and that's when I started making money. I
Yes.
was making money.
My experience was similar to that.
Yes,
Yeah.
So I was putting money away, but I was still active in the church. And matter of fact, I invited before I went to work while I was at Salesiana, we had the Passion played during Easter season. And I invited my English professors, my English teachers from Salesiana to watch me play Samuel in the upper room. And put that play on in the basement of our church. And that was my thespian experience. And I had an English teacher who loved it. And I got into him, and he would go back and forth, and he'd tell me about Shakespeare, and I studied Shakespeare. He'd tell me about Sir Francis Bacon, I did that, and Beowulf and all that stuff. I got into the literary aspect of it at Salesiana. I did well in English. I didn't do well in algebra.
Now, somewhere in there, you entered the seminary, right?
Well, that's when I was working at the Bach plant,
Yeah.
and was still active in the church. This young priest was assigned assistant pastor, and he was Father Tom Hayes. And he took me under his arm and he was mentoring me. And he said, Jim, why don't you give it a try? Well, I saw no future at Bach. It's just, I'll be a
Yeah.
lineman all my
Could
life.
be there for the rest of your life.
But
Yeah.
not that I'm complaining about the salary at all. But he said, why don't you give it a go? Okay, Father, I will. They gave me an application, and I sent it off to DC. I got my application back. Congratulations, you've been accepted as a candidate for the Josephites.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the rules of things. This is what you bring. This is what you cannot bring. And at table, the girl sat on one side, my mom, the boy sat on the other side, my dad. And I sat to my dad's right. Billy sat to my dad's left. In age progression, My older sister sat at my mom's right. We had dinner every week, every night. So it was decent. And after dinner, you couldn't talk during dinner. After dinner, everybody was given a chance to speak what they had done that day. And it came to me, and I said, Mom, Dad, sister, brother. I said, I got my letter back today. And the devil in me made me stand up. I said, I'm going to be a father. My dad said, boy, didn't I teach you better than that? Then I started laughing, and Mom already knew. She started laughing, and my dad said, what's so funny? I said, I got you, didn't I? So I told him I'd been accepted, and I had to put the stuff together. And up to Newburgh I went for my introduction to junior freshman college, and it was Epiphany Junior College, the groundswell of the major seminaries in D.C. If you get through 2 years of college there, you go into novitiate, which is a year of silence and reflection and discipline, self-discipline. Well, I made it through the 2 years at Salesiana. At the Epiphany, and I came home for the summer, went back, and I was enrolled in the novitiate. That's when you get the robe, the collar, and you had to go through a year of silence. Hard work. You did manual labor, they called it. So I was doing pretty good, I thought.
Yeah.
I got called in for my spiritual evaluation, first half, and my religious advisor says, Father Owens. I said, yes, Father. We don't like men who use the 4-letter word. I said, excuse me, Father. And the Father said, do I have your attention? I said, yes, Father, you do. What? He said, do I have your attention? I said, yeah. He said, we also don't like the men who use the 3-letter word, of which you're guilty. And I said, excuse me?
What?
I said, what 3-letter word? And he said, the W-H-Y. couldn't, yeah, I knew I questioned everything, you know. So,
You were questioning too much.
yes, indeed. I questioned the liturgy, you know. My soul shall be healed. I said, I want to say my soul will be healed. No. And you know, other things that I was observed doing, and it was against the rules and the liturgical practices. So, I mean, we practice how to say Mass, you know, hoc est in corpus meum, you know, we did all that stuff. We were gung-ho. But the Josephites had 3 vows. You had to take the vow of chastity, obedience, and poverty. They said, you know, we think you can handle poverty. We're pretty sure you can handle chastity, but we know you won't obey. So we have to ask you to depart. And that was a hurting thing. I cried and cried and cried. Of course, they gave me a bus ticket. I took a bus on Route 32 down to New York, afraid to go home. So I spent one night in the cloisters, sleeping on the cement, concrete there, the benches there at the cloisters, up by the George Washington Bridge. And then I went over to the bus station. I got a ticket to Wilmington. And I took the last bus out. I came into Wilmington, got off the bus, walked up to my mom and dad's house, the old house at 4th and Walnut. And back in the day, when I was president of CYO, I had to be home by 10 o'clock. Even though I closed the meeting out, I ran down Walnut Street like a phenom trying to get there. If I didn't get there in time, the door was locked. And Mom says, let me know when you get here, and go. And I dropped the key down. So I came up from the bus station late at night, and I went. She looked out the window and saw it was me, started crying.
She knew.
Never stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, Mom, I tried. So I said, I gotta get out of here. So I called her sister in Boston. I said, Aunt Isabella, I told her the story. She said, come on up. So I moved from Wilmington to Boston. And she says, you led a sheltered life, boy, you don't know nothing. No colloquialism, you don't know. So she showed me Boston. She showed me New England. She took me to the opera, to the Colonial Theater, to Cape Cod, to the North Shore, to where the cod fleets came in, and took me to all the Mediterranean restaurants and the Chinese restaurants. One thing she taught me I've never forgotten. If you want to go down to have a Chinese meal, and you don't see a Chinese person eating in there, you don't eat in there either. But she developed me.
Broadened your horizon.
Yes, indeed. Now make sure you shot. So she urged me to apply to Boston College. I did. I got accepted at Boston College because of my grades at Epiphany, but for the following semester. You know, this is like December. So I missed the fall semester. In the spring, I would have been accepted. But in February, I got my notice. After I left seminary, I lost my deferment.
Yeah.
So in February, I got a notice from
Uncle Sam.
Uncle Sam wants you. They had to report to Philadelphia because my home address was Wilmington, Delaware.
Uh-huh.
So I departed Boston and
You wound up in Germany.
yes, because I don't know, circumstantial. We were shipped from Philadelphia to Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Ooh.
And we all got into the assembly, and the sergeant said, I want your attention. You know, the cadre said, be quiet. Everyone from A to Z, A to O, everyone from A to M, step to the right. Everybody from M to Z, step to my left. So everybody who from the first group, they stayed at Fort Jackson. We got shipped to Fort Hood, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Okay.
and I got off the train there, and it was the hottest I've ever been. And we had on our winter uniforms. We had to march to the bus, and I took my basic training there. So,
Mhm.
but, I'm with a bunch of other guys who had lost their deferment.
Mhm.
We were ex-athletes, ex-students. We were former college candidates. They sent us all to track vehicle maintenance school because they knew we could do the academics and the work. So they needed track vehicle maintenance people in Germany. We all got shipped over. And
You learned how to repair these big vehicles.
everything, not just big, everything from a Jeep to a 2.5-ton truck.
Mhm.
We did it. And the Army was efficient in this respect. We didn't have to fix the engine. We had to learn to replace it and put a new one in.
Mhm.
And same thing with the tank engine. We took an old one out, put a new one in, and they shipped it off to get it repaired. So we were good. We were very
Mhm.
efficient. Yep. Germany was, Texas was the hottest I've ever been. Germany was the coldest I've ever been.
And you had some memorable experiences during your time in Germany.
Well, Germany was all new to us. You know, we didn't speak the language, even though I had some semblance of the language. But the mixture of guys were from in Germany were from mechanics to sergeant candidates. You know, they were good soldiers, bad soldiers, in that they weren't gung ho.
Mhm.
So I had a good mixture of people. In my opinion, coming out of college, I had some typing skills, and they made me company commander's Jeep driver, company clerk. And as a
Okay.
company clerk, I drove the Jeep for my commander. So every morning I'd take him to headquarters to get his orders for the day. And that's when all of us company clerks met. One of the company clerks happened to be Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley.
Yeah. So we would meet and then greet each other on the hood of a Jeep having our coffee while our officers were getting their orders. So that's how that came about. He was a good guy.
Now, you have some other stories about Elvis that you've shared with me.
I did, yeah. Well, one of the best was we were getting ready for an inspection. And if you didn't have perfect foot locker, you got a gig. The gig would put you on KP in the kitchen or something, you know. So we all bought, every month we all bought new shoe polish, new toothpaste, new this, new that, and put it in there because it hadn't any blemishes on it. So I was behind him one afternoon in the PX, the Army store,
Yeah.
and they had German national women as cashiers. So he put his stuff up in front ahead of me, and the cashier says, "Can I help you?" He said, the cashier said, "That's 17 marks." He said, "Here you are, darling." And she looked up, saw who it was, and fainted. He looked at me and says, I said, "When you got it, you got it." He said, "We're good. Let's pick her up." So we picked her up and set her on the seat, and she was sweating. It was amazing. And so he got his material and put him in the bag, and he left. And she said, I gave her mine after that. And, but he was, but as a soldier, he was as regular as all of us were. He
Well-
just had some special privileges.
You told me one time that he was a water boy.
He was. Because he couldn't go anyplace. He couldn't come to the. What happened to me was when I became company clerk, another fellow told me, "Owens, I heard you live up to your name. You can run." I said, he said, "I want you to come out for track." Well, I went out for track team. They call it TDY, temporary duty. And that left me, I had to leave the company commander and my company clerk's job. So I made a track team. And I'm living in special quarters. We're having special meals. We're living a life. And that sort of thing happens. So I enjoyed that because we had combat command A, B, C, and D. We had competition between each one. At the end of the competitive year, we'd meet for the meet, like the Olympics of Germany at Nuremberg. So I ran at Nuremberg.
Where they had the 1936 Olympic
Yes,
Games?
yes.
Oh my God.
I ran at Nuremberg, and I'm living in the world. I said, Jesse Owens ran here.
Yeah,
So-
that's
so-
your namesake.
Yes, so they put me into a 4x100
Uh-huh.
and the 100 meters. Well, I won the 100 meters, and I was the anchor on the 4x100. And I came around the corner, and I remember what the coach says. When they come around the coach passing like you, he has no chance of catching you. So I went past this last guy and came across the finish line, and I put my arms up like this with the baton in my hand, and both feet were off the ground. My wife had to take that as a picture. Both feet. And we won the meet. So one of the crowning glories of that was they all grabbed me and picked me up and carried me back to the bus. It was a crowning moment. But I said, yeah, I ran where Jesse Owens ran. And it was great. It was great.
Marvelous.
But
Marvelous.
and then when I went back to the company after track was over, I said to the sergeant, can I get my job back? He said, no, Owens, your name is Grass. The lawn, and the captain's got a lawnmower for your... I said, oh, okay. So he said, you better find something else to do. So I went out for football. And I made the football team because we were in great shape. And I was running back and come back. But when we had a break in the action, we huddle up and the water boy would come out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the water boy turned out to be Elvis. Because he had on a hoodie in disguise, nobody knew who he was, and that's the only way he could watch an athletic event, a football event. He come to the boxing, and he used to go to boxing, but everybody knew he was there. So I said, take him to the max. I told my daughter, I said, oh, Daddy, isn't he lovely? Oh, Daddy, can't he sing? I said, you're all messed up about that guy. I said, that guy brought me water. I had to tell the story all over. But he was kind of clever.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, long story short, tell us about the highlights of your career after you got out of the military.
Oh, let's see. After I got in the military, if you were drafted, the facility where you worked before you got drafted, or when you got drafted, had to hire you back.
They were obligated to
Obligated.
take
I was
you
working
back.
at Boston City Hospital as a lab technician, and it was a blown up adjective for carrying absolute alcohol or whatever back and forth to the supply
Uh-huh.
room, or taking a cadaver up to the autopsy room. It all
You did whatever needed to be
Be
done.
done.
Yeah.
so. During my stay in Germany, I reinitiated letter communication with the lady who, the young girl I had taken to her high school prom at Howard High.
Mm.
She's my sister's best friend. And I had asked her years ago, I said, Myrtle, why is she always over here to see you? And she said, she's not over here to see me. She's over here to be near you.
Uh-huh.
So we got that going on. And I was writing, she said, you never tell me what you do. I give her a description, what I did each day and all that sort of. So I got back home and we connected. She was in Albany and I was in Boston. And I said, can we get together? She said, come on down and see me. I went down to see her and took her to a Broadway play.
Mm.
No Time for Sergeants, I'll never forget it. And then, that was a good gig. I said, well, can we do this again? I got on a train, came down, took her to Birdland and jazz spots,
Mhm.
And that was my love. I developed that love for jazz in the Army. We had all the albums. And one thing led to another, and she said, let's take it to another level. So we decided, I'm in Boston, she had taken an exam in Brooklyn, and you got accepted to an office here in Albany, the fingerprinting clerk. And she said, where do you want to start? I said, you're working for the state of New York. You're solid. I'm working for the Boston City Hospital, and I don't know what my next move can be. I said, besides, you already have an apartment. Let's start in Albany.
Mhm.
So that's how we came to Albany. We went home in Wilmington, Delaware, and got married, and moved to Albany in 1960. She already had a little apartment, and I couldn't find a job to save me. So during the day, I'd go to job interviews. In the afternoon, I'd refresh the apartment. And then one day, the guy I became friendly with here in the Department of Labor in Albany, and in Albany, he sent me down to place over in East Greenbush. I can't think of the name of the lab now, and I got rejected. And then he sent me to, he said, "You're not going to like this, but I got to send you." They sent me down to John G. Myers' department store in Pearl Street. Yeah. And I got an interview, and she says, "I'd love to hire you." I said, "Ma'am, I need a job." She said, "I'd love to hire you, but you're overqualified." I said, "Ma'am, I need a job." So she hired me for maintenance. I went to work for John G. Myers. $1.12.5 an hour.
Oh, dear.
But I had $25 at the end of the week. I walk up Clinton Avenue back to our apartment. And I started. While I was there, I met a man, Larry, up on the carpet. He's in carpeting. And we got together and talked on our breaks. And he said, "I'd like you to meet my wife. She's working for a printing company." So he gave me her name. Her name was Betty Wilson. He was Larry Carmen. She was Betty Wilson Carmen. And I went up to see her. Let's see. Before that, I had been working with John G. Myers. And then I progressed very well. I left maintenance, went to the toy department. Mr. St. Germain wanted me to become his stock clerk. I became the stock clerk. He saw how good I was, and he said, "Would you like to be department manager of summer furniture?" I said, "Sure, anything that keeps me progressing and making money." So I did that. But next move was, there was an opening in furniture as a job, a furniture trainee, salesman trainee. Well, there was a fire next door, and everything in the block of John G. Myers had fire sales. And the two older ladies who were members of the department for years welcomed me, but I sold like $38,000 worth of furniture during the furniture sale. And I came over for my commission. I said, "We don't give commissions to trainees." So the two old ladies got my commission. And that opened my head up. I said, "I'm out of here," so to speak. I started looking for another job. And that's when I got sent up to Clarity Publishing. But I just started looking for another job before that. I went up to GEX in Latham when they first opened. I started working for People's Drugs. Excuse me. As a stock clerk. And I became stock clerk manager. And then I got talked to Larry. I got hired an apprentice at Clarity Publishing. I got my apprenticeship in 3 years. Became a full-time journeyman printer. That's when I started making money. Well, in the meantime, our family was growing.
Okay.
We left the Clinton Avenue apartment and moved to J Street. Had no idea. J Street had a reputation of being where the ladies lived. We got an apartment on J Street with 1 bedroom. We put the kids on the porch, and, bought a set of bunk beds, 2 kids there, and we started looking for a house. And it was difficult because there were no houses affordable in Albany. So we went out to Voorheesville, to Freesville, outside the city, looking for a cheap farmhouse. And I'm working for Clarity Publishing, and my guy says, "Owens, what are you doing?" I said, "Vinny, we got to move." He said, "Your wife doesn't drive. Why are you looking outside the city? If it's an emergency, you can't get there fast." So I started looking in the city. At that time, I was also a part-time worker in a drugstore. That was my Dargan Pharmacy on Swan Street. So this one evening, I was taking the assistant pharmacist home on Southern Boulevard. We went past this house on Delaware Avenue. He says, "Why don't you buy that one?" That's all I said. "I'll check it out." The next day, I called the Turcotte Realty. And he said, "I'll meet you at noon." I said, "Okay." So we looked at it. And I said, "What would it take to maintain until my wife took a look at it?" And he says, $100 cashier's check. So I said, "Okay." So I went down to the Key Bank, National Commercial at that time, and I said, "I need a $100 cashier's check." Got it. Took it down to Peacock on Washington Avenue, gone back to J Street, changed my clothes, went to work. Came home at 1 o'clock in the morning. The wife says, "How was your day?" I said, "Pretty good." "What'd you do today?" I said, "Oh, cut the grass. Oh, by the way, I bought a house."
Yeah. She loved that.
And she
I'm
said,
sure.
"You what?" I said, "I think you're going to love it. I'll pick you up at lunch tomorrow." I picked her up at lunch, took her to 99 Delaware Avenue, walked her through. She loved it. So we went through the process of buying that house. And that's where the family was raised.
Mhm.
And that's where my number one son still lives with his wife.
How many children in all?
In all, 8,
8.
5 boys, 3 girls.
Mm-hmm.
We lost Valerie a year ago, after a year. And 5 boys, 2 girls now. Angie is in Baltimore facility. She's a weak one, so to speak, physically, but she's the strongest mentally.
Mm.
And Kim, I'm going to visit next month in Atlanta. She works for World Church, and she graduated from school in Boston. And
Now, I know from what you've told me that you and your wife put a very strong emphasis on education for your
Absolutely.
children.
And to this day, I'm getting credit for her. I said, "No, you have to give credit to the wisdom and dedication of your mother." And she said, "I want to educate them." So I said, "Okay, let's do it." Well, when we moved to 99 Delaware Avenue, we were in cathedral parishes and St. James Parish.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're outside the border of St. James, so we couldn't send our kids there. We sent our children to cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
And I became an usher, and I became a lecturer, and she became president of the school board, the school association.
Mm-hmm.
So we got involved in that. That was good. And we sent our kids to the cathedral. And the nun says, "Mr. and Mrs. Owens, we can't do any more for your children." So we sent them to O'Brien across the street from 99 Delaware Avenue. And while at Cathedral and all these other wishes, we got involved in the Catholic Family Movement, CFM.
Mm-hmm.
And once a month, once every other week, we'd have a meeting, discuss a topic. Monsignor Jones from the Cathedral would be our religious counselor and would evaluate what our discussion was. One night, at my house, we were having a CFM meeting, and the guest speaker was Mr. O'Brien from St. Gregory's School, principal, headmaster of St. Gregory's
Now that's
in Loudonville,
over
on in Loudonville.
where was it?
St. Gregory's in Loudonville.
Loudonville, yes.
So-
I drive past it.
Oh,
I often wondered about
Yep.
St. Gregory.
Yep, all boys,
Uh-huh.
and to this day, all boys. I think and the young girls are invited up in pre-K, but after that they have to go. Anyway, after the meeting was over, we have a little supper, and a sip, and some coffee. And he came over and says, "I hear you have an outstanding family." I said, "Well, we think so." He said, "I have a situation I'd like to have you help me with." And I said, "What's that?" He says, "I'm the headmaster of St. Gregory's." I said, "Yes, I know." He said, "We don't have any black students in our school."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Well, I can't afford St. Gregory's." He said, "We're going to work something out if you're willing to send your boys there." Connie looked at me and says, "This is her bet, she wants to educate." And St. Gregory's known to be excellent, still to this day. So James went out there and he initiated St. Gregory's School for the Owens family. And everybody else followed in his footsteps. So the quiet accolade that I have is that I think I'm the only father in the city, Tri-City, who sent 5 boys to St. Gregory's and 5 boys to Albany Academy.
And
It's amazing.
you're pretty confident that record's never going to be broken.
But I'm not having 5 boys anymore. Nobody's having 5 children anymore. We're pretty confident that's going to hang for a while. But yes, and the proof is in the finishing touches. You know, we were all sitting around talking about it. My son Earl put together an 8.5 by 11 flyer with like tentacles on the plant. How St. Gregory's, Albany Academy, Franklin and Marshall, Brown, Princeton, they've all gone to good schools.
And your grandchildren are continuing.
And continuing the same. You know, the grandchildren, 3 from the University of Maryland, 2 from the University of Maryland, 1 from Towson. The other 2 at Yale, at Penn. My son Timmy's son graduated from Princeton. His daughter's going to graduate from Smith. It's just continuing on and on. Tom, I named him after the pharmacist I worked for, Tom Darden. And he didn't want to go to college. So he married a young lady over in Schenectady who was hell-bent on becoming a executive with Price Chopper. Well, Price Chopper is not known to advance colored people either. So they went from here to there, Massachusetts, Newburgh, and then they got an invitation to join Harris Teeter in Baltimore, Harris Teeter in North Carolina. So they went to work, both of them went to work for Harris Teeter, another chain like Gallup, and he became an executive and a manager, and she's head of H&R. They raised their 2 children the same way. It's all good stuff, all good stuff. And I just sit back and thank God because of her. She started it, she mandated it, and we did it. It's all good stuff.
I remember when we met, and you were taking an evening course at Siena College.
Yes.
Because
Some priest came down to St. Joan of Arc. Asked me about what I was doing. He said, why don't you go to Siena? I said, I can't afford Siena. You know, he said, no, they have continuing education classes. Check it out. I can't remember his name, but that's how I got started. And I took a class. I think we had to pay $25 tuition. No, $25 entrance fee. And then you had to buy your books, but you didn't have to pay tuition. And you didn't get credits. You just audited the course. That's how I got started.
And as long as there were empty seats in the
classroom. So I had to wait till everybody picked their classes
you'd be welcome.
to see what was open. And I ended up with Mr. Valade in American history.
He taught American history in addition to being a librarian.
In the librarian. And it was kind of weird. And a sidebar here. I talked to Mr. Valade. And he's the one that got me interested in taking the trips to Gettysburg. It was a Civil War buff anyway. But we're sitting in the back, and he brought in a saber, a long rifle, M1, and a carbine to illustrate the progression of the Army's weaponry.
Right.
And he said, he explained how this worked, how that worked, how many shots that were fired. He picked up the M1. Said, how much does this weigh, Mr. Owens? I said, 1480 pounds, sir. And the class looked around at me, and, you know, I was the oldest one in every class. I didn't care. I didn't care about
Probably could have broke it down and put it back together.
we cleaned it with Tide because it would sparkle.
So I remember when you came into my class.
Mhm.
That was about, was that Making Sense of the 60s?
Making sense of the 60s. Yes, it did.
And we got to talking, and you told me, that you were among the first African-American students in the state of Delaware to attend integrated school.
Yes. Yeah.
And,
That's how we got started.
and later on, we went to visit Salesianum, and outside the new building is a historic marker. You want to tell us what it says?
I don't know what I remember you making me take a picture standing alongside of it.
Basically, it says, in 1950, what was the date?
November
November?
14, I think.
Yeah. Salesianum, Father Lawless accepted 5 African-American students at Salesianum High School and became the first integrated school in the state of Delaware.
Yeah.
And,
That made
initially I was a little bit skeptical. And I went back and I looked through desegregation in Delaware. And at the college level, yes, there had been a few African-American students accepted at the University of Delaware.
University of Delaware.
Before.
Mhm.
But below the college level,
Right.
Salesianum was the school of record. And you and I then collaborated.
Absolutely.
We went down and we interviewed
research.
many people.
Yes.
And we wrote up the story, and it was published in the Delaware History Journal.
They came to the front door.
That was the title, and the significance of the title. You need to explain that, because I didn't appreciate that at first.
At 8th and West, at 8th and West, all the students had to enter the side door.
Mm-hmm.
And the front steps led up to the main office. And no student was allowed to enter the front door. So there are pictures of Bill Jones outside the side door.
Mm-hmm.
You may have seen it. And it leads up to the first level and then down to the bathroom level. And that was where everybody came in. And I guess we were getting away with murder because that was the only entrance and exit. There was nothing at the other end of the building back in those days. So, yeah, the title is appropriate. They came through the front door.
And then I remember, I'm trying to remember the woman's name. We went to Vermont.
She was a Rob. She was a rascal.
She was, yes, and her
Her middle name was Mo?
nickname was Boo.
Boo, yeah.
Yeah,
Not Mo, it was
and
Boo.
I can't remember her given name, but she said, everybody calls me Boo. But she was responsible for sponsoring your education at Salesian.
At Salesian, Monticello.
Providing the scholarship.
Yeah. We went to see her.
Uh-huh.
The first thing she asked,
Yeah.
where's your tie? I said, it's in the car, Professor Murray's car.
That was the trademark.
Yes,
yeah.
indeed.
And the significance of this is that you said that she was a rascal. And I knew nothing about Delaware at that time.
Right.
But her father, Jacob Rascal, was a top manager official in the what's the chemical company?
DuPont.
DuPont, in the DuPont company.
Yes, he was.
And was also an important figure in the Democratic Party.
Yes, yes. That had a lot to do
And-
with other things going
And
on.
and Father Lawless had people like her on his side. He had a lot of influential
And, you know,
people.
in subsequent times, thinking about it, if the parent of a student at Salesian threatened Father Lawless to take their son out,
Mhm.
where would he go?
There were other schools.
Not as good as Salesian. I went back last year for Martin Luther King celebration.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, you've continued your ties
oh yeah, I
with
continue.
your high
Every time
school.
I go through them, I stop and say hello to somebody.
Mhm.
And I feel proud. Oh, in the class of 53, so anyway. Went back for this celebration, and they had a graduate from Salesianum and University of Pennsylvania, I think, or Penn State, as a guest speaker. So I put myself up in a hotel on Delaware Avenue. I said, I'll walk over. So I walked over the bridge, through the park, over to 18th and Broome. And the ceremony began at 6 or 6:30. I was like 10 minutes late when I got there. And I walked in, and principal says, Owens. I said, yes, Father, I made it. He gave me a big hug, and we shook hands. And the master of ceremony was explaining the events that were going to happen during the evening. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, excuse me. We are being honored by the man who started all this. He just walked in the front door, and I just went bananas. I went crazy because they all stood up and gave me a standing ovation. It was amazing. Then I met with all the black students there. We had lunch and stuff, and it's like, I said, you guys have it. Keep it going,
And I believe this is correct, that you are now a member of the Hall of Fame.
All 5 of us.
All 5, the first 5.
All 5 of us. Members of the Hall of Fame. And that's at an elite level,
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, one of the members of the Hall of Fame donated some funds to build a new stadium across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And it's equal to the University of Delaware Stadium. It's a high school level. It's great.
School is still going strong, and they are honoring the events that happened more than 50 years ago.
Yes, they are. Yes. And I was pleased to stop in and say hello. And Father says, you're welcome anytime. And the students we all got together in a private room and had a little luncheon. And I got a group photo and asked any questions you want to ask them. Let me ask them anything. And like, did you encounter segregation when you went here?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess some of them now are experiencing little sidebar stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I met one student who was going to become a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
I said, whoa, keep up the good work. Another one's going to go to universities. They all get good university applications. So, and one kid asked me, you ever ask a white girl out? I said, why would I? So I guess all these things still go on.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned a long time ago was it was all boys. There was no threat to the young ladies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we got it going. That's how we maintained it to today.
And certainly, Father Lawless deserves
Absolutely.
a great deal of credit. Now, tell us a little bit about Father Lawless, especially his physical demeanor.
We called him the mouse.
The mouse. Why the mouse?
He was diminutive. He was a small person.
Yeah.
He smoked a pipe. And we called him the mouse because we could be going about our business. We could be going sneaky business. And all of a sudden, he'd be right there.
Uh-huh.
Young man, with his pipe in his mouth. Sorry, Father. Oh yeah, he was quiet and moved around the place like you wouldn't know where he was. And then we called him the mouse. But he was strong in spirit and strong in will. Something that you may want to know or may not know, or you do know. His superior was his superior became the chaplain to Grace Kelly and Prince Rainier.
Yeah.
And that's when he had to leave the order of the Salesians to take that position in Monaco. And that's when Father Lawless had some freedom to act, but he acted quietly.
Yeah, yeah. He learned from his previous unsuccessful.
Experience.
Don't announce it in advance.
Exactly.
That gives the opponents time to organize.
Yes.
He just sprung it in the middle of the semester.
Yeah.
Nobody was expecting it.
No.
And the story that I heard was that if parents should come to Father Lawless and complain about the presence of black students in his school, he would say, well, these are your children. You can do what you want, but this is my school. I can do what I want.